There is fresh optimism and hope in the Middle East that a ceasefire deal in the Israel-Hamas war is closer than ever. Mediators are intensifying efforts to secure the Israel-Gaza ceasefire to release the hostages. The ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, which has repeatedly failed over multiple issues, has now narrowed most of its gaps in the agreement's clause.
Good evening.
The United States, joined by Arab mediators, are looking to close the ceasefire deal between Israel and Gaza-based Hamas militant group and halt the 14-month-long war which has already killed over 45,000 Palestinians. US President-elect Donald Trump's recent message to ascertain a deal between Israel and Hamas and return the hostages have had an impact on the talks that also shows a sudden optimism in the talks going forward.
Just one last one on this. When you say that there will be hell to pay if the hostages are not released before January 20th, what does that mean?
Well, they're going to have to determine what that means. But it means it won't be pleasant. It's not going to be pleasant, yeah.
So what would the deal look like? During the attack on Israel on the 7th of October last year, Palestinian militants led by Hamas seized 251 hostages. 96 of them are still held in Gaza, including 34 the Israeli military says are dead. Hamas officials have said that the current framework for a deal would see the implementation of a ceasefire and then the gradual release of hostages over 3 phases. The 3-phase ceasefire plan includes the release of 33 hostages under a humanitarian category, alive or dead in the first stage. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he wants to maximize the number of living captives that will be freed at this stage.
אני אסיר מתן סמגאוקר ואני נמצא בשבי החמאס יותר מ-420. אמא, אני צופה בך, אני שומע עלייך הרבה. אני יודע על מה, אני מבין את הדברים שאת עושה.
There are a total of 115 hostages remaining. Men, women, whether civilians or soldiers, as well as 2 children, at least a third of whom have been declared dead in absentia by Israeli authorities. The ceasefire plan calls for an initial 6-week phase in which Israeli civilian hostages and female soldiers will be released in exchange for quote-unquote hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israel has also wanted veto power over the identities of some of those Palestinian prisoners who would be released in return. The first phase would see the gradual return of displaced residents to Gaza City and the north via the coastal highway under Israeli army monitoring. The second phase would see the release of Israeli male soldiers in exchange for a number of Palestinian prisoners, including at least 100 with long-term sentences. During this phase, Israel would complete its military withdrawal, but then would maintain forces on the eastern and northern border areas with Israel. So what have been the sticking points? Despite numerous rounds of indirect talks, there have been several sticking points in the ceasefire talks. Negotiations between Hamas and Israel have faced multiple challenges, with the primary point of contention being the establishment of a lasting ceasefire. Even in recent efforts to broker a deal, Hamas has cautioned that hurdles still remain. They suggest that Israel was still quote-unquote imposing new conditions in the ongoing negotiations. The latest proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza has the support of the United States and most of the international community, but Hamas has not fully embraced it, and neither, it seems, has Israel. Hamas appears concerned that Israel will resume the war once its most vulnerable hostages are returned to them. And even if it doesn't, Israel could make demands in that stage of negotiations that they were not part of the initial deal and are unacceptable to Hamas, and then resume the war when Hamas refuses them. Another major sticking point to reaching a deal has been a small strip of land bordering Gaza's southernmost border with Egypt, and who will control it. The area is called the Philadelphia Corridor. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly stated that he doesn't want to withdraw Israeli troops from the Philadelphia Corridor. Another unresolved issue is the governance of post-war Gaza. It remains a highly contentious one, including within the Palestinian leadership. Israel has repeatedly said that it will not allow Hamas to run the territory ever again. Despite all of this, Hamas is still hopeful of a ceasefire deal after having serious and positive talks. Hamas has expressed optimism about the prospects of reaching a deal about hostage and ceasefire negotiations with Israel. Though the United States, Qatar and Egypt have acknowledged progress in negotiations in recent days, officials caution that a deal is neither sealed nor guaranteed, though the upbeat language and recent diplomatic activity point to a significant momentum towards reaching a deal. Hopefully, there is some breakthrough now, with a ceasefire deal closer than ever before.